Good morning and welcome to the Sunday morning sermon for August the 18th of 2024 for Black Rock Baptist Church. And we're still in the middle of our study in the book of Exodus and the life of Moses. We're focusing today on chapter 16 in the book of Exodus and talking about the fact that complainers never win. A month has passed now between the time that Israel has departed Egypt to the time that the nation has reached now in the wilderness, a place called the Wilderness of Sin. Water had been a problem back in chapter 15, and now they had run out of food in the wilderness. They were frightened. They were frightened to the extent that they began to think about the good old days back in Egypt, when they used to sing and eat. They became discouraged before they had hardly gotten started on their journey here. They'd been on the road only a few days, and because they had missed a meal or two, they're already ready to go back into the slave camps of Egypt. The growling stomachs soon produced grumbling lips. Today I want us to see 5 things in this passage of Scripture, chapter 16 of the book of Exodus. 5 things that this passage shows us about complainers. And the first thing is this: complainers will always find something to complain about. Verses 1 through 4 of chapter 16 reveals, "And they journeyed from Eliam, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Eliam and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they departed from the land of Egypt. Then the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them, all that we had died at the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, and we had bread to eat to our full. For you have brought us into the wilderness to kill us, this whole assembly, to kill us with hunger." Amazingly, enough of the children of Israel had seemed to learn nothing. They were learning absolutely nothing from the past experiences that God had put them through. They're learning nothing from God's faithfulness and care. And again, they give in to self-pity and grumbling and complaining. Yet we have to admit that all too often, when faced with difficulties in life and problems in life, we give in to despair and complaining as well. The truth of the matter is that some of us have made grumbling an art form. We grumble habitually, only taking time off on Sundays sometimes. We grumble if we're caught in slow traffic. We grumble if our meal at the restaurant is not delivered, or if it's not prepared exactly the way we like it. Lots of things make us grumble and growl on a daily basis. I want you to notice with me this morning some of the characteristics of complaining and grumbling. First of all, grumbling is a gratitude problem. Grumbling comes as a response to pain and problems in life. We grumble because we think we should experience pleasure rather than pain, prosperity rather than adversity. Whenever we're tempted to murmur and complain, we need to review the past. We need to remember how God has truly blessed us. When I'm reminded of all the ways the Lord has blessed me, though I don't deserve it, I wonder how I could possibly complain about the relatively insignificant things that go wrong in my life from time to time. If I could only learn to count my blessings and give thanks for all that I have received from the hand of God, I'd be a whole lot further along. Grumbling is a gratitude problem. Secondly, grumbling is a perception problem. The problem is that when we grumble, our perception is faulty. Grumbling invariably causes us to distort the facts. There is an exaggerated memory of the past. The children of Israel exaggerated in their minds the benefits of being slaves in Egypt. They said they sat by the pots and ate all they wanted of a great variety of foods and meats. As slaves, that could hardly have been true. They conveniently forgot about the lash of the taskmaster, the anguish in their hearts to be free as they did back-breaking work for Pharaoh. Then they also forgot the memories that as slaves in Egypt, there was always the imminent threat of starvation. Their perception was faulty. Thirdly, grumbling is a contagious problem. According to verse 2, it says, "Then the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained." What had begun with a few now has contaminated the whole group. They're all complainers. So we see that complainers, grumbling, is a perception problem. It's a contagious problem. And it's a gratitude problem. Complainers always find something to complain about. Secondly, complainers have already failed the test. God responds gently and graciously to the grumblings of the Israelites. Verse 4 says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not." What an interesting announcement. I will meet your need for hunger, but the meeting of that need will bring a test. You ever found that to be true? I have. We find ourselves in the midst of some predicament that we can't escape, so God says, I'll provide a way out for you. I'll show you the way. And we accept his answer, his new direction, which introduces us to a new set of tests and trials of a different kind in life. So while we are relieved of one wilderness problem, we gain a new one. According to verse 4, the daily gift was intended as a test. This manna from heaven, behold, I shall rain bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. Gathering of manna was a test of their obedience. Thirdly, complainers are always looking for someone to blame. They accused Moses of leading them into the wilderness to kill them, to end their lives. They thought that they were only venting their frustrations on a man like themselves, but in reality they were grumbling against God. In verse 6, Moses tells the children of Israel, "At evening you shall know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your complaints against the Lord." But what are we that you complain against us? Also, Moses said, "This shall be seen when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening, and in the morning bread to the full. For the Lord hears your complaints which you make against him." And what are we? Your complaints are not against us, but against the Lord. Moses declares to them, "The Lord hears your complaints which you make against him." As Moses clearly pointed out to them, grumbling was not a protest of his leadership. It was a protest of God's leadership. Moving along to number 4. Complainers are never satisfied with what they're given. Beginning in verse 13, we find out how God provided for Israel's needs. It says, "So it was that the quails came at evening and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay all around the camp. And when the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance, as fine as frost on the ground. So when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, 'What is it?' For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, 'This is bread which the Lord has given you.'" Psalm 78 calls manna angel food. Every morning the angels brought down this heavenly food and literally spread it before them. They did not have to work for it. They didn't have to prepare it. All they had to do was eat it. But they still didn't like it. Manna was described as having appeared in flakes or small round grains on the ground. It's described in Exodus chapter 16, verse 31, as being like a white coriander seed. And the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Numbers chapter 11, verses 5 and 6 records the feelings of the children of Israel toward manna. They said, "We remember the fish which we ate in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now our whole being is dried up," or you might say that they've lost their appetite. They say there is nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. You can almost hear the yuck in their voices. Even when the people of God are being fed in abundance, they grumble. Why? Because the food God provides, it's not what they preferred. We want steak. God provides bologna. Number 5, complainers are never satisfied with how much they're given. In verse 16, the children of Israel are given specific instructions about how to gather this manna. It says, "This is the thing which the Lord has commanded. Let every man gather it according to each one's need. 1 omer for each person, according to the number of persons. Let every man take for those who are in his tent." Then the children of Israel did so and gathered more, some less than they were told to. And Moses said, "Let no one leave any of it till morning." Notwithstanding, they did not heed Moses, but some of them left part of it till morning. and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them. So having run out of food in the wilderness, the Israelites feared they're going to starve to death. One can only imagine the zeal with which they harvested the first provision of manna. There was enough manna, it would seem, for every Israelite to fill his tent, if he wanted to, but the efforts to hoard manna were in direct disobedience to God's instructions. It would seem that Israel was guilty of two sins: greed and grumbling. Now, a conservative estimate of the total number of the Israelites who came out of Egypt would be about 2 million of them, because we know they had 600,000 men able to go forth to war. And Omer was to be gathered for every one of those 2 million souls, and an omer is the equivalent of about 6 pints. There would be 12 million pints, or 9,000 pounds of manna gathered daily, which was 4,500 tons. Hence, 10 trains having 30 cars, 10 trains with 30 grain cars, and each car having 15 tons of manna that's what would be needed for a single day's supply. Over 1 million tons of manna were gathered annually by Israel. So God was very generous with them. According to verse 35, he did this for 40 years. The children of Israel ate manna for 40 years, it says, until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. Well, in conclusion, while it's not my intention to examine the whole story of the manna and with all of its spiritual implications, I do want us to notice a few simple applications here as we close. First of all, this teaches us to look to the Lord for our supply. The Israelites are told that this supply will come from heaven for you. It's God's supply to the people of Israel. Secondly, it teaches us to look to the Lord daily for our needs. The manna was to be gathered on a daily basis. Fresh food must be gathered every day. You can't live on yesterday's blessings. We must have something fresh every day. We can't live on the gathered provisions of yesterday, despite our dependence is a daily matter. Dependence upon God is a daily matter. Every day, fresh problems arise in our lives to test us as to whether or not we will depend on the Lord, whether we will daily put our trust in Him. And then thirdly, it teaches us that to feed on Christ is the only secret to strength and blessedness. The Lord Himself found a sermon in this story in John chapter 6, verse 22 and following. In this great story that Jesus told, Jesus had fed the 5,000 to provide for the physical needs. He used it as a picture to present to them their spiritual needs. He uses a play on words to draw them back to the story of the Israelites in the wilderness. God had there prepared bread from heaven. And here, when He feeds the 5,000, He describes Himself as the bread of heaven. Not just to meet their physical needs, but to give them eternal life, to meet their eternal needs. We'll pick up on this again next week as we continue our study in the life of Moses. Until then, God bless, and let's continue to exchange prayers daily.